I'm the most favored pet of Prince Arthur Thorn, trembling as I've catered to his every whim for 7 years. Everyone says I'm head over heels for him. Of course, I love his money, his power, his influence. But more than all that, I want his life. I'm an orphan, both my parents are dead. To be precise, I had a flirtatious mother who loved to seduce men. And a hot-tempered, murderous father who couldn't stand being cheated on. Bad genes are hereditary, otherwise why would Ellie Everly become a homewrecker? That's how the world sees me. But I clearly remember my mother dancing gracefully while my father played guitar for her. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Arthur Thorn likes married women, especially those who can dance. As the youngest son of the Thorn family, he's the object of everyone's favor. Countless women are sent to his bed right after giving birth. And I'm the one waiting outside his room, ready to clean up the mess after Arthur's done. Because I'm his acknowledged mistress, while the others are just called bedmates. This is the result of my 7 years of devoted service. I'm not Arthur's type, but I've been with him the longest. Because I'm the most obedient and compliant. Who could refuse a highly educated and beautiful woman, who's considerate and attentive, gentle and submissive to him? Especially when this cool beauty resembles his true love. Arthur's true love is my mother. This is something I discovered 7 years ago. As soon as I returned to my flat after work, I knew Arthur was there. The door was open, not even closed. He sat on the sofa, cuddling a beauty in his arms flirtatiously. The beauty was Lily James, a popular actress known for her pure and innocent image. Lily's belly was slightly swollen, clearly nurturing a child inside. I knelt beside Arthur's feet, respectfully massaging his legs. He didn't mind my presence, kissing the beauty's luscious red lips. "Janie is coming back, don't get into conflict with her," he said. His breathing was heavy, obviously aroused. "Remember to pick her up at the airport next Monday, and arrange a nice gift for me." Arthur hastily threw out a sentence, then impatiently carried Lily to the bedroom. I didn't respond and he didn't care. After all, Janie and I had issues, she even almost got me killed. But what did past grievances matter? I'm nothing but a dog at Arthur's feet, only able to crawl and accept his orders. Holding back again and again, I answered, "All right." I would certainly prepare a satisfactory gift for this conspiring young master and miss. Cradled in Arthur's arms, Lily looked back at me with a knowing smile. Before I discovered that video, I had nothing but the utmost respect for Arthur Thorn. Without a single thought of betraying him. After my parents died, it was Arthur who took me away from the backward fishing village. He paid for my education, sent me abroad, and even promoted my entry into the entertainment industry. At that time, I had only 2 thoughts, one was to repay Arthur's kindness, and the other was to investigate my parents' killers. Yes, I didn't believe my mother was a loose woman. Nor did I believe my gentle father would impulsively commit murder. But I was too young, I didn't even get to see my father one last time. I just received news of his suicide in prison out of guilt. I can't forget that dark, rainy night. Half a year after my mother was found dead in the woods, my usually strong father received a letter. He got drunk, held my hand, and made me swear to avenge my mother. Then he walked into the stormy night with a knife, never looking back. In my midnight dreams, I'm often startled awake by my father's black eyes burning with rage, its hatred. I often wonder why Arthur Thorn wants to help me. I'm not stupid. Is the small favor of my mother once teaching them dance enough? Harboring these doubts, I lived quietly in the Thorn household until I turned 17. On my birthday that year, Arthur helps me take a day off school to rest, as he has to go on a business trip to another city. At noon, he suddenly messages me, needing an urgent document. He asks me to send it to him using the computer in his study. This is the first time I've touched the computer in his study. Wanting to help him find the file, I click on the first folder. It's password protected. Without thinking, I type in a password. Surprisingly, it opens. My password has always been my mother's birthday, to remind me never to forget my deep-seated hatred. My heart pounds, and an ominous feeling spreads over me. The folder is full of pornographic videos. The women are naked, while the men are all covered up. I smile bitterly. Of course I know about his penchant for married women, but I'm just his dog. What use is a dog's opinion? Taking a deep breath, I intend to close the folder and look for the file he needs. As I scroll down, I reach the bottom. A quick glance, and my hand starts shaking uncontrollably. This is the oldest video in the folder. The woman's face on the thumbnail is one I'll never forget. It's my mother. So it was him. It was Arthur Thorn. At the moment the truth is revealed, I'm surprisingly calm. All my questions are answered by this video. There's no time for sorrow. I hurry to send Arthur the file he needs. Arthur, you didn't mess with anything else on my computer, did you? Ellie, there was one folder that was locked. Do you need it? Arthur, no need. Rest well. The screen emits a faint blue glow, casting an eerie light on my face. Looking at our chat, I find it laughable. In the video, my mother is naked, with a group of men moving on top of her, their expressions lewd and entranced. My mother was once Isabella Foster, an internationally renowned ballet star. In the video, she cries, screams, and struggles with all her might. Finally, she falls silent, her head dropping. Belatedly, my heart aches. I taste salt on my lips, tears have already covered my face. I hate this so much. How dare Arthur Thorn let me use this computer? Is it a test? Or is he so confident? Does he believe I can't fight back? From that day on, I had only one wish left. To kill Arthur Thorn and his despicable friends. Soon, Arthur returned to London from Manchester. He went to a dinner party and came home very late. I wore the white dress my mother loved most when she was alive, looking alluring as I pretended to sleep on the sofa. I heard Arthur stumble and sit down on the sofa. I feigned waking up with a soft cry. Arthur, why are you so drunk? Arthur stared at me with heavy eyes, looking dazed. I got up, letting my shoulder strap slip down to reveal a patch of snow-white skin. I embraced him, my soft breasts touching the hard angle of his forehead. He suddenly looked up and kissed me fiercely. It worked. Arthur wasn't in that video, but he was definitely the mastermind. He did love my mother. As we rode the waves of passion, the word teacher slipped from between his lips. The day Janie Murphy returned, it was pouring rain. It seemed as if the heavens were also encouraging my plan for revenge. I waited at the VIP exit with dozens of bodyguards, bowing our heads respectfully for Miss Murphy's appearance. Click-clack, quick, crisp footsteps approached. She was still so arrogant. Janie Murphy had a face so strikingly beautiful it was almost aggressive, completely different from my style. Wretch! Janie Murphy slapped me hard across the face. Her tone was contemptuous. Have you come to flaunt yourself in front of me? Don't think Arthur will dote on you forever. You're just like your mother, a fickle whore. I acted as if I couldn't feel the stinging pain, allowing my cheek to swell. Miss Murphy, please get in the car. Let her gloat for a little while longer. A rash, impulsive, foolish woman was exactly the weapon I needed. She was indeed provoked, her face flushing red, losing all semblance of grace. She grabbed my hair, pulling painfully at my scalp. You wretch, you seductress. Call me Mrs. Thorn. I'm Arthur's fiancée. No wonder your parents are dead. Your mother deserved to die, and you should join her. The vicious curses continued, so different from the elegant image she presented to the world. Seeing me beaten to the point of weak breathing, the surrounding bodyguards finally pulled her away. The butler, Josh, who had observed the entire process, casually walked over and coaxed the furious young lady into the car. He had grown up with Arthur and still held some sway with Janie Murphy. I lay on the ground, hair and clothes disheveled, face covered in red marks, like a dead dog. After everyone had left, I finally burst into uncontrollable laughter. I saw the red light under Josh's tie clip. It was the miniature camera I had given him. I had bet correctly. His sister had chosen suicide after being violated by Arthur Thorn, taking 2 lives. In their eyes, servants were just servants. Even if they grew up together, they were still just dogs with a bit of favor. The revenge plan officially began. If I was the despised, self-degrading mistress, Then Janie was the privileged, graceful, and kind young lady. But humans are the least forgiving creatures. The more perfect the image, the greater the backlash. A video began to circulate quietly online. Shaky footage showed a woman resembling Janie Murphy, passionate beneath an obese and ugly man. Janie Murphy panicked. For these privileged elites, private indulgences were of no consequence, but public image was paramount. Moreover, she hadn't yet married Arthur Thorn. If this incident caused a rift with the Thorn family, she would become the pariah of the entire Everly clan. Even if everyone knew the video was fake, what difference would it make? The truth was never as important as public opinion. Just like how my mother went to her grave bearing the stigma of a harlot. To cling tighter to Arthur Thorn, her meal ticket, Janie became even more assiduous at the company. Her treatment of Arthur's mistresses grew increasingly brutal. Forced abortions, gang rapes, smear campaigns. She acted with impunity, always with Josh Mills by her side. Josh Mills was the most crucial piece of the puzzle. Arthur Thorn was being watched closely by Janie Murphy. With his lover not by his side, he came to me to vent his frustrations. After our passionate encounter, I nestled in his arms. "Mr. Thorn, don't you think Miss Murphy has been going a bit too far lately?" I asked. Janie Murphy's notorious reputation was already spreading online. Arthur's mistresses were not to be trifled with. While some were coerced, many had willingly thrown themselves at him. Arthur's face darkened as he spoke. "She has indeed. And she doesn't know how to clean up after herself properly. See? They never thought taking lives was wrong, they only cared about whether it was discreet enough." I sought out his lips, planting a soft kiss. "Why don't you assign Josh to keep an eye on her? Otherwise, if the stock market fluctuates..." I didn't finish my sentence before Arthur was aroused again. He impatiently replied, "I'll assign him right away. Now, it's our time." After our intimate moment, I lay trembling on the bed. Arthur paid me no mind and walked straight to the bathroom. I opened the drawer where a bottle of vitamin C lay quietly. In reality, it was birth control pills. I had no desire to bear the child of a criminal. But in special circumstances, I needed to increase my leverage. Closing my eyes, I pushed the bottle to the very back of the drawer. Videos of Janie Murphy bullying others kept flooding into my phone. As the wedding date approached, she grew increasingly anxious. Josh Mills sent word that she was planning to get rid of me. Perfect, I wanted to get rid of her too. At first, only a photo of Janie Murphy smashing someone with a wine bottle was circulating. Everyone thought this was just the usual resistance from Arthur Thorn's little mistress. Then, wave after wave of videos were released. Janie Murphy beating and verbally abusing women. Forcing women to have abortions. Her face contorted with rage, spewing profanities. Lying in men's arms, flirting shamelessly. By the time her team reacted, it was too late. These videos had spread all over the internet. They wanted to sue but couldn't find anyone to blame. They tried to deny it, but every scene was so real. Some netizens even dug up Janie Murphy's timeline, condemning her for only going after mistresses but never daring to discipline the men. The facade of the perfect goddess was torn off, her image of grace and kindness crumbling. The backlash from fans was far greater than Janie had imagined. Online, there was an overwhelming flood of curses and mockery directed at Janie. With my instigation, Lily James took action. She posted just one message on social media, with photos of her body covered in bruises and several abortion records. Does having power and influence mean you can do this? The emotional dispute escalated into a class conflict. Ordinary statements and apologies were no longer enough to quell the public's anger. Janie Murphy, that white lotus, does money mean you can take lives as you please? Is she sick? I remember Lily James was close to her husband. These adulterers must be in cahoots. We thought she loved Arthur Thorn so much, turns out she's cheating too. What right does she have to make a fuss? We must boycott her. Ordinary people have dignity too. If she doesn't go to jail for what she's done, how can we ordinary people feel safe? Calls for a thorough investigation into Janie Murphy's crimes grew louder. The Everly family's stock prices kept falling, even affecting the Thorn family. Arthur darling, listen to me. Janie Murphy, who had been busy dealing with mistresses, rarely appeared in the Thorn Company building. Whispered discussions from surrounding employees could be heard. Arthur Thorn, with a dark expression, shook off her hand and walked towards his private elevator amidst pointing fingers and stares. Shut up. I'm Mrs. Thorn. You're all Thorn family employees, watch out or I'll fire you. Janie Murphy shouted, unable to bear the discussions around her, her voice shrill but lacking conviction. Ding, the sound of the elevator doors opening. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? I don't recall marrying you, Arthur Thorn sneered. Are you coming or not? Janie Murphy hurried into the elevator, standing timidly to one side, complaining in a coquettish voice. Arthur darling, you must help me. Those lowlifes keep slandering me, I can't even go out anymore. Arthur Thorn remained silent. He wasn't truly an ignorant playboy. If Janie Murphy's issues couldn't be clarified, he might need to find a new fiancé. However, with that incident, unless absolutely necessary, Arthur Thorn didn't want to fall out with her completely. I haven't had much business lately. Staying at home, I came across some rants in the company's main group chat. It was full of abuse and mockery directed at Janie, calling her a slut, accusing her of taking advantage of others, and saying she had no self-respect. Glancing through, I found it laughable. Previously, they had praised Janie to the skies, treating her as the perfect goddess. Indeed, those placed on pedestals fall the hardest. I connected my Bluetooth, and after a crackle of static, Arthur Thorn's voice came through. On the first day Arthur and I got together, I planted a listening device in his office. Thanks to this little gadget, Arthur's business plans have repeatedly failed. To this day, he hasn't fully taken control of the Thorn family's power. You idiot! I told you the others were just for fun. How am I supposed to protect you after you've caused such a mess? It was Arthur's angry roar. I listened with pleasure. But Janie Murphy's next words made my heart bleed with hatred. Arthur, you can't abandon me. You selfish, heartless man. Have you forgotten how Ellie Everly's mother died? You may have forgotten, but I haven't. If you hadn't asked me to lure her out, how would she have? You said you just wanted to sleep with her, that's why I tricked her into coming out. But you actually got a group of people too. I no longer had the heart to listen to their subsequent arguments and debates. Janie Murphy, I knew it. Initially, I didn't want to destroy her completely. The online backlash was just revenge for her bullying me. In the future, when the Thorn family falls, without the engagement, she could still keep her life. But to think she was also involved in this matter. I want to eat her flesh and drink her blood. But I finally understand why she hates me so much. Or rather, it's not hate, it's fear. Janie is Arthur's childhood sweetheart and official fiancé. Though her attitude towards Arthur's lovers is nasty, it's never been murderous. Yet she repeatedly tries to kill me. She pushed me into water, drugged me at a banquet, hired thugs to beat me. Arthur never intervenes in these incidents, only casually remarking, "Don't kill her, I still find her quite useful." I thought his cold observation was due to indifference. But perhaps at some point, in the dead of night, when he sees my face, does he feel an uncontrollable fear? He hopes I'll die in Janie's schemes. That way, he won't have to bear the guilt. The pressure from all sides was becoming increasingly unbearable for Arthur Thorn. He wanted to break things off but feared the evidence Janie Murphy held. Yet if he didn't, the board of directors was growing more and more dissatisfied with him. If he didn't salvage his reputation soon, he might lose what little power he had left. Darling, do you hate Janie Murphy? Arthur asked, holding me after a round of lovemaking. I do. I'll never forget the things she did to me before. I sobbed in his arms. Arthur pondered this. He had to get rid of that crazy woman Janie. He'd been toying with me for years and was bored of it. If Janie hadn't been causing so much trouble lately, he wouldn't have come to me. Perhaps it was time to bury Janie along with their past. Darling, Janie's been getting out of hand lately. You've been with me for so many years. The truth is, I fell in love with you long ago, Arthur gazed at me intently. His slimy look made me want to vomit. Love me? More like he finally wanted to kill me. But Janie's always stood between us. You know, I've been with all those women to protect you. As he spoke, Arthur seemed to convince even himself. As if we were truly star-crossed lovers forced apart. Just help me with one thing. Once we get rid of Janie, I'll marry you and make you Mrs. Thorn right away. All right, I softly agreed. Rather than being your Mrs. Thorn, I'd prefer to be your widow. To torture you with your own money, legally. I want you to suffer even in hell. I listened carefully as Arthur poured out his scheme. The cruelty and viciousness of the plan made me feel inadequate in comparison. The handbag beside me blinked with a red light. I wondered what Miss Murphy would do when she discovered her beloved Arthur was plotting to kill her. What madness would ensue? A few days later, Arthur's company released an official statement. Not only did they sever ties with Janie Murphy, they even threatened to sue any influencers who linked her to Thorn Industries. With such tactics, coupled with coordinated social media campaigns, Arthur's company's reputation finally began to recover. As the internal pressure at Thorn Industries eased, Arthur's mood greatly improved. He felt vindicated in his decision to abandon Janie. However, he still needed to eliminate that woman completely to feel at ease. In a cafe, I smirked at Arthur's text message. He expected me to do his dirty work without offering any benefits in return. How could things be so simple in this world? Mr. Mills, here are the recent recordings. I slid the USB drive across the table. Josh Mills remained noncommittal, asking, when do we make our move? He had been following Janie for many days now. Each time he saw women suffer the same fate as his sister, his hatred grew. Soon, I said, touching my belly. There should be a little life growing inside by now. Once I can rightfully claim the compensation I deserve. Janie Murphy suddenly went mad. If she had previously targeted those mistresses, now she was specifically targeting Arthur. She would wait in the company lobby every day on time, causing destruction and hurling insults non-stop. She looked determined not to stop until she saw Arthur. The company security tried to stop Janie. But she actually drove her luxury car straight into the lobby, causing another chaotic scene with people falling over. After all, she was still the young lady of the Murphy family. Before the family completely abandoned her, no one dared to truly confront her. Arthur Thorn was extremely annoyed. The stock price that had just recovered fell again, and the pressure from within the family increased. It even alerted his parents who were still on vacation abroad. After a phone call, Arthur's face turned ashen with anger. Bang! He smashed his phone violently onto the ground. Useless fools! Useless fools! Can't even handle one woman. Mr. Thorn gave him an ultimatum on the phone. Get married and establish a career, or else they would reconsider the ownership of his shares. Arthur didn't care how Janie made a scene, but the Thorn family's reputation must not be tarnished. Since Arthur was almost useless now, it was better to have a child as leverage early on. After years as father and son, how could Arthur not understand his parents' intentions? Asking him to have a child meant they were going to completely give up on him. Ah! He roared with bloodshot eyes, unable to control his emotions. He clutched his head with both hands, kneeling on the carpet and bowing his head helplessly. I stood quietly to the side, admiring his pained expression. Recently Arthur had been staying here. For the sake of his emotional health, I kindly added something to his meals. No wonder he felt happy here, after all I could give him physical pleasure. I quietly left the room, feeling it was time for a strong dose. Changing into my mother's clothes, I felt like I was back on that night. But the pain had turned into pleasure. Mom, help me one more time. Let me avenge you. Mr. Thorn, have some soup. I brought the delicious chicken soup to his lips. Arthur looked up and drank it. I was wearing a soft white dress, with my long hair cascading down my alluring curves. For a moment, he seemed to see his teacher again. That was the first time he committed an evil act. Because of the desire in his heart, he colluded with Janie. Janie Murphy, that vicious woman. Wasn't she also an executioner? What right did she have to threaten him? Why was he the only one abandoned by the family? The more Janie wanted to climb up, the more he couldn't let her have her way. Baby. Arthur pulled me over and examined my face carefully. Delicate, pitiful, helpless. Even if such a person had a child, she would still be his dog, right? Will you marry me now? How about we have a child? Arthur said hesitantly. Marrying a disgraced orphan was also a form of rebellion against his parents. Was he really going to go against his parents? I smiled coyly and said with surprise, Mr. Thorn, I'm so lucky. I was actually going to tell you I'm pregnant. I buried my head in his chest, hiding the malice I could barely contain. I can let you have all the fun you want. I breathed softly, my fingers tracing circles on his chest. This face he had dreamed of, this body that fit him perfectly. And even a fool willing to get pregnant for him. It was too perfect. Arthur immediately logged onto his official account and announced a press conference to be held next Sunday. He didn't mind giving me the title of Mrs. Thorn to make me happy for a few days. He wanted to kill Janie, which is a potential threat, but I should also die along with that past. Arthur leaned close to my ear and said tenderly, since you're pregnant, give birth to it. I'll arrange everything at the hospital. His chest was burning hot, but my heart was ice cold. Wanting me to die on the day I give birth, wanting to bury that evil act forever? Keep dreaming. I'm afraid you won't even live to see that day. Arthur picked me up in one swift motion, and we fell onto the bed in an embrace. We drifted off to sleep, each with our own ulterior motives. In the following days, Arthur Thorn surprisingly acted like a good husband. He wouldn't let me lift a finger for meals or housework. He carefully tended to my pregnant belly. Every morning before leaving for work, he'd give me a sweet goodbye kiss. If only he didn't come home from work with lipstick stains on his collar and reeking of women's perfume. Then he'd truly seem like the perfect husband. I knew Arthur was still carrying on with Janie. I hummed cheerfully at home while gestating, listening in on his phony sweet nothings to Janie. Just thinking about the press conference made me tremble with excitement. I could hardly wait to watch those two dogs tear each other apart. I opened the social media. Josh Mills was another crucial player in this drama. I'm not sure if it's confidence or stupidity, but even today Josh was still tasked with keeping an eye on Janie. What did Arthur tell you to do on the day of the press conference? I asked. Josh replied, stay with Janie, don't let her leave the flat. Don't stop her. Your wish is about to come true. Let her drive herself. I exited the chat happily and got up when I heard the engine roar outside. I went to open the door for Arthur. Welcome home, darling, I cooed, wrapping my arms around his neck and giving him a passionate kiss. The lipstick mark on his shirt collar was glaringly obvious, like a declaration of ownership. But neither of us cared. I didn't love Arthur. Arthur thought I was submissive and that marrying me was truly a good decision. After all, I wouldn't dare confront him about his affairs with other women, nor would I become arrogant. Soon, the day of the press conference arrived. I wore a white dress, playing the role of the demure wife trailing behind Arthur. Facing the media's cameras and microphones, he still maintained his false gentlemanly facade. Standing firm, Arthur put his arm around my waist and gazed at me lovingly. There have been many false rumors about my personal life recently, so I'd like to clarify today. Miss Janie Murphy and I were indeed once engaged, but that engagement was broken off long ago when she committed those despicable acts. The one I love most is Ellie Everly. She will be my future wife, and in fact, we're already expecting a child. Each piece of news he dropped was more explosive than the last. The severance of the Thorn-Murphy alliance. The homewrecker becoming the new Mrs. Thorn. Arthur Thorn, mired in scandal, declaring he'd found true love. Camera flashes went wild and questions flew as chaos erupted. I stood on stage, coldly listening to Arthur's insincere declarations. In an inconspicuous corner, I spotted the person I most wanted to see, Janie Murphy. She had fallen to her knees, head in her hands, face contorted. She seemed unable to believe she'd been so callously discarded. She wasn't going to be his wife after all. Just yesterday they'd been going at it hot and heavy in his office, with Arthur swearing eternal devotion to her. Our eyes met across the room. The mockery in my gaze was obvious. Janie's eyes blazed with hatred. But for an instant, a flicker of deep-seated fear passed through them. It looks so similar, doesn't it? I smiled slightly. Today's white dress was also one I'd chosen from my mother's belongings. I wanted Mother to witness every step of my revenge, to put her spirit at rest. If she truly was in heaven, surely she would bless me. Seeing Janie about to burst out of the corner to disrupt the press conference, Josh quickly restrained her. I don't know what method he used, but he managed to temporarily calm Janie according to plan. These two scoundrels couldn't cause trouble before I became the real Mrs. Thorn. Arthur fielded increasingly pointed questions from the media below. I noticed him fidgeting with his ring, a sign he was losing patience. Mr. Thorn, you say you love Ellie most, but can words alone prove your love? I recall you were recently embroiled in scandal, with intimate photos of you and your female stars leaked. This was the planted reporter I'd arranged asking his question. Those photos are fake. Fake. If you dare slander me again, I'll buy out all your companies. Arthur's body was already depleted. The drugs in his food had gradually accumulated, and now he struggled to control his emotions when angered. He panted heavily, finally exploding. But the media, sniffing a big story, were like a pack of hyenas that had caught the scent of blood. If they couldn't kill him, they'd at least tear off a layer of his skin. In this era where web traffic is paramount, the truth doesn't matter. What matters is sensationalism. The clamor from below grew louder and louder. My final chess piece, Lily James, has made her entrance. She burst in, acting like a madwoman. Her dress was deliberately stained and dirty, her hair disheveled, and her whole body emitting a foul odor. Arthur, Arthur, please save me. Lily cried out loudly, trying to throw herself at Arthur Thorn through the crowd. Cameras clicked incessantly, with some even starting live streams on the spot. People recoiled from Lily's beggar-like appearance. In the commotion, she managed to cling on to Arthur. Arthur, we lost our baby, she wailed. I love you, I love you. Let's have another child. Arthur nearly vomited. Having been pampered all his life, he had never touched someone so filthy before. The stench of garbage assaulted his nostrils as security finally reacted and pulled her away. Seeing Arthur dazed from the stench, it was time for my entrance. I embraced him without hesitation, despite the filth on his clothes. The fresh scent of jasmine filled his senses, along with the soft, delicate body in his arms. My eyes glistened with tears of concern, in stark contrast to Lily's crazed behavior moments ago. She was mud on the ground, I was the moon in the clouds. I was the beauty he had been pursuing, the one who truly cared for him. With Lily's appearance, the questioning voices from below grew louder. The pressure from mind-altering drugs, emotions on the brink of losing control, and the recent assault of that putrid smell, my timely appearance created a subtle suspension bridge effect for Arthur. Just escaping the stench, a flicker of hesitation passed through his eyes, quickly masked by determination. I know many of you doubt my feelings for Ellie, he said. Tonight, we will share our marriage certificate. Please give us your blessings. With that, Arthur led me out of the venue, heading straight for the registry office. In just 15 minutes, I would become Mrs. Thorn, legally entitled to his inheritance. As for Janie Murphy, whose expression had turned manic down below, I trusted Josh would stop her, ensuring she appeared at the right moment. In the car, Arthur closed his eyes to ease his headache. I nestled in his arms, gently massaging his temples. This gesture made him feel even more at ease. We soon arrived at the registry office. It was quiet, with no obstacles as we took our wedding photos. When the red seal was finally stamped, I snapped back to reality. Tears of excitement fell as the thrill of impending revenge made my heart race. Arthur immediately took a photo with me to prove he had kept his word, hoping to salvage some reputation. The online response was explosive. Seeing the flood of congratulatory comments, he smiled smugly, his expression towards me softening. I followed him obediently. Just then, the driver came running over, saying he had received a call from his daughter's school. She had been rushed into emergency surgery, and he wanted to take a few days off to care for her. Arthur, in a good mood, readily agreed, eager to gain more goodwill. Darling, your husband will drive you himself today. How's that? Are you happy? Arthur asked playfully, steering with one hand. Given his famous number plate, other cars always gave way to him on the road. "I'm happy," I said softly. Seeing a familiar luxury car speeding towards us from the opposite direction, I added, "How could I not be happy when you're about to die?" Arthur couldn't believe what he was hearing. He slammed on the brakes in the middle of the road and roared furiously. "What did you say, you wretch? You dare trick me? I'll kill you!" As he unbuckled his seatbelt and lunged at me, I clearly saw Janie's twisted face. Josh, sitting in the passenger seat, suddenly reached out like lightning and forcibly turned Janie's steering wheel. A deafening crash echoed through the air as the two cars collided. Thanks to Josh's last-second turn, the car body smashed directly into the driver's side. Arthur, who had been roaring like a lion just moments ago, was now wedged between the car seats. Seeing him bloodied and unconscious, I felt a rush of satisfaction. I had driven this car a few days ago, using the excuse of modifications to remove the airbags. Under the immense crushing force, he was flattened like a meat patty. The car ornament I had specially installed also miraculously pierced his eyeball. It was a gruesome sight. Josh's final turn meant he wasn't much better off, but with airbags, he might still survive. However, he wasn't innocent either. Before his sister fell into Arthur's clutches, he had helped Arthur commit numerous misdeeds. If he ended up half dead, it would be a fitting punishment. Janie had been driving fast, and the impact was considerable. My body ached terribly. The scorching sun shone into my eyes, forming golden halos. I closed my eyes peacefully. I dreamt of my mother again. This time, my father was there too. In a flash of white light, we embraced. With relieved, happy smiles, they walked towards the end of the light. I opened my eyes to see a pristine white ceiling. With effort, I turned my head and saw Arthur's parents, looking haggard. After all, it was their own child who died. How could they not be grief-stricken? Janie had witnessed firsthand how Arthur abandoned her, marrying the daughter of the teacher she envied most. Add to that Josh Mill's instigation. In a fit of rage, she ultimately committed a grave mistake. "Uncle, Auntie." I spoke with difficulty. My eyes held tears of joy, but my face bore an expression of sorrow. "Arthur, my child? Ellie, since you're officially part of the Thorn family now, you should change how you address us." "Arthur, he..." Mrs. Thorn's voice was hoarse, she looked like she had just finished crying. "Would you agree to a ghost marriage?" She seemed aware that her request was unreasonable, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. Arthur Thorn was my enemy, and so were they. If not for their excessive indulgence, and later covering up the crimes Arthur committed, how would he have grown increasingly brazen, ultimately losing his life at the hands of someone he looked down upon? "I'm willing, but the baby..." As I spoke, I had to mask my joy with sobs. The baby was gone too. Thank goodness. The thought of giving birth to a child with a murderer's blood made me sick. Mr. and Mrs. Thorn hurried to comfort me. The night passed without further incident. The Thorn parents only had Arthur as their child. I was Arthur's widow, and with the little one in my belly gone, they could only adopt from a branch family. Arthur died a gruesome death. It took several days and nights of restoration to barely make him presentable. At the funeral, I kept vigil for 3 full days. Without sleep or food, I copied Buddhist scriptures for him. My hands were covered in blood blisters. Moved by my deep affection, the Thorn parents even took the initiative to help me complete the transfer of the inheritance. But they didn't know those weren't Buddhist scriptures. They were various malicious curses I had painstakingly collected. Cursing him to never reincarnate. Cursing him to beg in the bitter cold. Cursing him to be flayed alive, suffering endless torment. Cursing him to have no descendants, to suffer day after day. After the funeral, I appeared in court as a witness. To testify to Janie Murphy's intentional murder. In court, her demeanor was manic, shouting and screaming. At times she would cry, saying she was bewitched. Other times she would say she had no choice. Occasionally, she would smile at us eerily. The Murphy family exerted their influence, and ultimately she escaped the death penalty. But life imprisonment is the most torturous punishment. The Thorn parents wouldn't let her off easily. This was just the beginning. A hopeless life in prison would be her greatest punishment. As she left, she shouted, recognizing thieves as fathers. No one understood her meaning, except the Thorns and me. Had her conscience awakened? I didn't believe it. It was just a final, desperate struggle. I patiently comforted the two elders, who were angry yet guilty. I had already arranged their future path. They hadn't planned to leave the country again after this return. After all, they weren't at ease letting me fully control the Thorn family's assets. So, I had plenty of time to torment them. 3 years later, Thorn Industries officially declared bankruptcy. Janie Murphy also died miserably in prison. It was said that when she was found, her body couldn't even be pieced together. The video hidden deep in Arthur's computer was leaked. The entire internet was flooded with sympathy for me. Some even voluntarily prayed for my mother. And I was sitting in a nursing home, admiring the terrified looks on the faces of Arthur's parents as they lost control of their bodily functions. I opened a dance studio with low tuition fees, just to give those girls a chance to pursue their dreams. Publicly, I advocated that the sins of the father should not be visited upon the family, and would continue to care for Arthur's parent at the most basic level. As for how to care for them, getting old inevitably leads to mental instability. It's best they receive good treatment in the nursing home I specially designed.